In this video, we'll be installing a Tusk Quiet Glide skid plate on a Polaris RZR 900 XP. The Tusk Quiet Glide skid plate is an excellent way to protect your investment. It provides full coverage for the undercarriage of your machine. We're talking rocker-to-rocker protection, which is significant surface area over your stock skid plate. The Tusk Quiet Glide skid plate is made of heavy-duty UHMW, which isn't going to dent or break like aluminum or your stock skid plate. It offers a really slick surface that's going to allow you to slide over the obstacles with ease. Another great thing about UHMW is it's much quieter than the aluminum skid plates. A lot of times you'll get rocks that kick up and hit the bottom of your machine. This is going to dampen that sound and make for a much more enjoyable ride. The first thing we need to do is access the bottom of the machine. We can do this by using automotive stands, jacks, or blocks. For illustration purposes and to better show the installation process for this video, we've carefully tipped the machine on its side. It was necessary to pinch off the gas line and wrap a rag around the brake fluid reservoir cap to prevent any leaks. We've also placed a block under the roll cage to prevent the body of the machine from coming in contact with the ground. However you decide to access the bottom of your machine, be sure to use caution and take all necessary steps to avoid any damage or injuries. Always secure the machine with straps, blocks, or stands so it can't fall and injure you or anyone else. If you lack the proper safety equipment or know-how to install the skid plate safely, please refer to a professional mechanic. Alright, so now we can begin removing the stock skid plate. Remember to keep track of all the stock hardware, as we'll be using most of it to attach the new skid plate. Once the stock skid plate's out of the way, the next thing we need to do is take the new skid plate out of the box and make sure all the hardware and pieces are accounted for. You can do this by referring to the hardware list included with the installation instructions. So the first thing we're going to do is take our double-sided tape provided in the hardware kit and stick a piece to each one of the 4 small UHMW pieces for the rear differential. And once we've got one of those square tape pieces stuck to each rear differential skid spacer, we're going to go ahead and peel off the backing, and then using one of the provided M6 by 40mm bolts, poke a hole through the sticky tape with the bolt. And then we're going to line the hole in the spacer block up with the hole in the frame, and go ahead and stick that piece to the frame. You can use the bolt by threading it into the hole, making sure the block is lined up correctly. Once it's stuck down into place, just remove that bolt. And then just repeat this process for the other 3 rear differential spacer blocks. When those are in place, we're going to install the long spacers that go under the frame directly under the floorboards. On these, we'll use 2 squares of the double-sided tape on each end of the spacer. Once the tape's installed, we're going to make sure the frame surface is clean. You might need some contact cleaner for this, and then just peel the backing paper off each piece of tape. And again, using the M6 by 40mm bolts, line up the holes in the spacer block with the existing holes on the machine. When the first long spacer is installed, just repeat this for the other long spacer. Just thread those bolts into the existing holes in the frame and stick that spacer block down into place. Once both of these spacers are installed, we can position the rear piece of the skid plate up into place. Use one of the stock bolts and spacers for the front hole and just get that finger tight for now. For the middle holes, you'll notice there are 3 counterbore holes. If your machine's a 2011 or 2012, it will use the rearmost hole. If your machine is a 2013 or newer, it will use the forwardmost hole. This is a 2013, so we'll be threading into the existing hole in the forwardmost hole. So now we've got both middle bolts installed. So then for the 2 rearmost counterbore holes, since they're going through the spacers, we'll replace the stock bolts with the provided M6 by 40mm bolts to thread into these holes. And with both these bolts installed, go through with a wrench and slightly tighten all these bolts up. Be sure to leave these loose enough for later alignment with the machine and other pieces of the skid plate. And now it's time for the front main piece of the skid plate. Hold that up into place and begin threading the stock bolts and washers into each counterbore hole. And then for the 4 front counterbore holes, we're going to replace the shorter stock bolts with the provided M6 by 40mm bolts since they have to go through the spacer blocks. Go ahead and thread each of these 4 bolts into the existing holes on the machine. Make sure they stay loose enough for later adjustment. The next step is to drill the pilot holes in the rear skid plate piece. Make sure the skid piece is sitting flush with the frame rail and line up with the main piece of the skid plate. And then using the 9/32 drill bit, drill through the one side of the frame rail and then install a 5/16 by 1 1/4 Torx head bolt with self-cutting threads. Tighten that down so the bolt head is sitting flush with the skid plate. Go ahead and drill the other hole the same way and then install another one of the 5/16 by 1 1/4 inch Torx head bolts with self-cutting threads. And again, just tighten that bolt so it sits flush with the skid plate. The 2 rearmost holes in the skid plate piece will not require drilling. Simply install one of the provided 1/4 by 1 1/2 Torx head bolts with self-cutting threads into each hole. Be sure to bury the bolt head lower than the skid plate to protect it from rocks and other objects. The next step is to attach both sides of the skid plate. Be cautious when drilling on the passenger side because the fuel tank is located directly above the frame rail. We only need to drill through one side of the frame rail to attach the skid plate, so make sure you don't drill all the way through. So we're going to be using the 7/32 drill bit. When you've got the first hole drilled, install one of the 1/4 by 1 1/4 Torx head bolts with self-cutting threads. Tighten this down so it holds the skid plate against the machine and makes drilling the next hole easier. And then we're just going to repeat this process until we've got all 5 bolts installed on each side of the skid plate. With the sides of the skid plate secured, we can drill the 4 countersunk holes in the middle of the skid plate. There's 2 in the rear of the main piece of the skid plate, and then 2 in the front. Again, we're using the 7/32 drill bit to drill these holes. When all 4 holes are drilled, go ahead and install a 1/4 by 1 1/4 Torx head bolt with self-cutting threads. Again, make sure the bolt head sits flush with the skid plate. So after you've got both rear bolts installed, move to the front and install both those bolts. When all the countersunk bolts are tight, the next step is to go through and make sure all the bolts and washers in the counterboard holes are tight. Check all the bolts on the main piece of the skid plate and the bolts in the rear piece as well. The last piece to install is the front differential piece. Hold it up into place and align it with the machine and the front main piece of the skid plate. Then using the 7/32 drill bit, drill one of the rear holes and install one of the 4 remaining 1/4 by 1 1/4 Torx head bolt with self-cutting threads. Tighten it down enough to hold it in place as you drill the other rear hole. Once you install the other rear bolt in this piece, tighten down both these rear bolts. Next, drill both front countersunk holes in the front differential piece and install another 1/4 by 1 1/4 inch Torx head bolt with self-cutting threads into both these holes. Tighten both these bolts down. And when the front differential piece is installed, go ahead and double check your work, make sure all the hardware is tight, and you're done with the install. For more information about the Tusk Quiet Glide skid plate, visit our website www.rockymountainatvmc.com. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy your Tusk skid plate.